Well, good morning and welcome to today's webinar. This is Peter Frank. I'll be leading our session today called Planning for Next Year's Finances with Church360 Ledger. This will be an overview webinar and we'll cover all the core features of Church360 Ledger today with a special emphasis on looking ahead. All right, so my contact information is there on the screen. I am the Senior Manager at Concordia Technology Solutions. I've been with our group for about 5 years now, a little over 5 years. I've been with our organization for over 10. So I've been with Church360 Ledger since the beginning. I am not a financial expert by any means, although I'm very familiar with our software and have led several training sessions, probably a couple dozen at this point, just on Church360 Ledger. I always like to hear from our customers and from our potential customers, anybody in the congregations, and how they're using not just Ledger, but our software in general, or technology in general. So please feel free to reach out to me at any time at peter.frank@cph.org. My phone number is on the screen too. I'm not in my office as much as I'd like, so that's not always the best way to reach me, but if you do leave me a message, I'm happy to call you back. A couple housekeeping items before we get started. First off, the plan for today is 50 minutes of presentation and then 10 minutes for questions. I'm notorious for going over those 50 minutes, so please bear with me if I do. We save time for the questions at the end, although if I don't have enough questions in the queue, I may go a little over. So please ask questions throughout. I've got it pulled up on my screen here that tells me how many questions are waiting to be answered. So as you think about them, go ahead and put them in the queue, and if I can get to them during the presentation, I will. And if not, we'll use that dedicated time at the end to get all the answers. One other note, we are recording this webinar, so we'll be sharing it later on today. It'll probably be middle of the afternoon, if not closer to the evening when we send that out. So if you need to step away or if you want to share this, the recording will be made available to everybody who registered, and then we'll put it on our YouTube channel and our resource center. So if you are watching this after the fact, thank you for tuning in. I'm sorry you couldn't be with us live, but you'll still get the benefit of all the information. You just won't get to ask the questions. So a little bit about ourselves before I get too far into Church360 Ledger. Concordia Technology Solutions is the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House. We've been producing software for congregations since 1984, which to me is just an incredibly long time. It just shows how quickly we saw that this is a valuable tool for ministries and how quickly our customers saw that. And so I thank you for partnering with us for so many years. So we've got many great things in the works. Church360 is the latest in church management software and where we are spending a lot of time improving it. So let me talk a little bit about how that fits into our overall picture. So Church360 Ledger is our finance software. That's what we'll be talking about today, and we'll get into the specifics in a moment. It's part of the Church360 software suite, which includes also Church360 Members and Church360 Unite. Now, Members manages your people information, so all of their contact information, family information, attendance, and offerings. And that's a key thing to note, that offerings are entered through Members and are synced with Church360 Ledger. You don't enter the individual offerings into Ledger. Now, Unite is our church website builder, and there's no direct sync with Ledger because they're a little bit different, but the Members ties them together nicely, and there's a lot of connection points there. We won't be going into those details today, but if you hear me mention them, that's why, or sometimes that's the answer to the question that we solve that in one of our other applications. So a little bit about Ledger. Like I mentioned, it's church finance software. It is designed to be intuitive, meaning that you don't have to have financial training to use this. Now, you have to have a little bit of a concept of what you're doing in finances, because that's what it's all about. But you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to be trained in this with a CPA or anything like that. It's meant to be secure, and that's secure both from a software standpoint, but also from a user standpoint, that you can only do the things that you need to be able to do. And so you can set up those permissions just right. It also tracks everything that you do to have that sound, secure audit trail. And that's really important, and today's software to make sure that you can see exactly what happened at any given time. And lastly, it's focused on churches. It's meant to be for churches and not businesses, and you'll see that really distinguishes it from some of our competitors, the big software companies that produce finance software for a variety of different purposes. This is really focused on just the things that a church would need, and so it makes it a little bit simpler, makes it a little bit easier to learn. You don't have to navigate through all of the different, things like inventory and the business management tools that a church doesn't need. So here's our outline for today. First, we're going to talk about which key New Year decisions we're going to focus on during the presentation. We're going to do an overview of Church360 Ledger, which shows the basic navigation and how you use some of the tools that are throughout the entire application. We're going to do a tour of high-level tasks, so we'll certainly include everything in those New Year decisions. We'll show a few other things as well to give you an idea of how to get started. This is an overview webinar, so it's meant for seeing the complete picture and digging into a few things specifically. And then, like I mentioned, we'll take the questions and provide some answers at the end. All right, so I always like to make a few assumptions about those who are attending the webinars. That helps me prepare for the material. So the assumptions I made about you who are here today is that you're familiar with church finances, that you are new to Church360 Ledger. That doesn't mean you have to be completely new, having never touched this. But if you've used it for several years, you'll know most of this information. So new to Church360 Ledger, and I also always assume that as you are serving in the church, you are extremely busy because there's no shortage of work to do in the church. So my goal is that this is helpful to you, that Church360 Ledger is a tool for your ministry. It is not your ministry, but it helps you do what you need to do in the congregational setting. So that is my assumptions for you. I'm going to validate a few of those assumptions. I'm going to put a few polls out here. If you don't mind taking a moment to answer those, that would be very helpful to me. So the first one is to please select the option that most closely describes your primary role at church. So are you on the finance side or the administrative side? Are you on the clergy side of things? Or are you on the technical side? We get many people who are just here setting up the software for congregations. So it looks like just about everybody is on the financial manager side. So that is great. Thank you very much. Let me ask this next question. Are you currently using Church360 Ledger in your congregation? And options are yes, no, and no, but planning to subscribe soon. So that means you've already made that decision. You're just waiting for the right time. So looks like we've got kind of an even split between yes and no, so that's great. That's kind of how I plan for this to be. So let's go ahead and talk about those key New Year's decisions. All right, first off, we're going to focus on reviewing the chart of accounts. I see this often, and that people will let the chart of accounts kind of get out of date, and it becomes this lengthy list, and as you go into budget, there's going to be lots of zeros because you're no longer using those. And so we'll look at that and how to add and subtract accounts. Then we'll go into setting budgets for those accounts, specifically the income and expense budgets. You don't set accounts for or budgets for assets and liabilities. Then we'll review the user permissions and show how to update it, how you can use that. We'll set up recurring transactions. As you look at the new year, it's always a good practice to figure out how to automate these tasks as much as possible, knowing that they can't be fully automated because things are never 100% consistent. And then finally, we'll look at how you finalize the year-end process. And we'll just talk about a few of those things. We're not going to go into that in great detail because, again, this is at a kind of introductory level. We don't need to get into all the specifics. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to switch my screen over to Church360 Ledger. That is the main view, and like I mentioned, I'm going to do an overview of the application to begin, and then we'll get into these specific things. So this is your home screen. After you've logged in, you'll get to this view, and there's a number of things that are consistent throughout the application. So first off, this top bar here, your administrator toolbar, it has this little Church360 logo with the $sign on there. To click, all you have to do is click on that and it'll take you back to the screen. Next is your set of books. So you can use Church360 Ledger to manage multiple charts of accounts. So like the example we have here is our general church and then our school. I know many congregations will have multiple books that are managed by different people. This allows you to have one account with Church360 Ledger for your church and use it for those different sets of books. So like if in this example, if you have a school that manages their accounts separately, I know at my congregation the church and school are actually together, but then we have men's club which tracks theirs separately, and so you could set it up that way. Now on the far right you've got these icons. The first one is a printer icon. That is your check queue, your print queue for checks, and we'll look at that in a little while. Then you have pending transactions. That goes into a few things like payroll and offerings, and then also recurring transactions. The third one there is the reports tab, and it looks, you'd think you might have a lot of reports. Each one of these is customizable, and so we'll talk about that in a little bit of detail later on. So these are the core reports that you'll need. Then settings, which has all of your key settings that are based on your books or based on your account. And we'll talk about how that kind of distinguishes, how you distinguish between those two things. And then finally the one on the right is your user settings, and so you can update your password or you can log out from there. Now I do want to indicate if you are starting a trial, you may not have the print queue yet, or the pending transactions. It depends on what you are entering in. So just know that if you only see 4 up there, that's why. All right, below that bar, we'll go back to the home screen. You have what we call our Omni Bar. And this white area right here allows you to see your entire chart of accounts. See, we've got a lot of accounts in there, and navigate across them so you can quickly and easily find something. So you can scroll down, and let's say we go into retirement plan. So this is a liability under payroll deductions, voluntary retirement plan. Rather than navigating through all of that, you can just do the drop down. You can also type in there and it'll show you, and not only will it show you the name in case you have some named similarly, but you have here the path, so liabilities, payroll deductions, voluntary, or expense support staff deductions. So that's just one example. The key thing that I want you to understand is just how easy it is to get to one of your accounts. Often this is overlooked because it is there on every screen. It almost becomes habit to see it. And I've heard some people will just consistently use this area right here to navigate below that, and that's another way to navigate. So you could click on liabilities and see your sub-accounts, payroll deductions, voluntary, retirement plan, and get all the way through there. Now that's, again, a little bit time consuming. The other thing I want to point out is that you have this cookie, or the breadcrumbs, cookies, apparently I'm very into the sweets this morning, breadcrumbs that take you to that, show you that whole path. And you can click this little arrow and reduce it if there's a graph there. So, or reduce it to show just the graph. It hides those boxes. So we'll go back to home here. Next to the Omni Bar, you have your transactions view. And when you click New Transaction, you can click the type of transaction. So transfer starts. It's a real basic form, and it overtakes your screen so that you can focus just on that. Now you can switch between transactions just by clicking up here. So if you click the wrong one, you can change it. We've styled this to look similar to what you might see in your checkbook, to make it really easy to understand, and nice set areas to enter the information. We'll go into each of these later on, but to start off, I just want to point out that everything that you do in a transaction is just creating a journal entry, but it's making it kind of a nice pathway for you to go down for that type of transaction. So we'll look at that later on. Below that, we talked about the breadcrumbs to the right. You always have the ability to export that view to Excel or to print the screen. And those are just consistent throughout all of it. And the print will take you to a special print view that is formatted doesn't include all the navigation and everything else. So you can see there how that's going through and formatted. So it relies on the browser's print settings, so it will vary depending on your browser and other things. All right, next we have our date selector, and we've tried to make this quick and easy for you to jump to the date that you need. So it's you have your years at the top, your quarters down below, and those are the quarters for the current fiscal year, and then also your months for the current year. So you can see how easily you can get to that, and you don't have to type in that date range. Now you can also type in a date range if you'd like. That's kind of the last resort, because most of the time you'll be looking at things from an annual, quarter, or monthly basis. So we'll click on 2017 there. So that is the main area of navigation that's the same. This view, this account view, will show you all the transactions and the related chart here. And you can see that as you hover over it, you can get the date and the running balance. On this view, it's assets less liabilities. But as you click in here, that will change based on what view you're on. And so, for example, income and expense, you have a budget of what you're expecting, and it'll show that budget line in the orange and show all of your actual information right down here. And that's built on the timeline. So the beginning is over here at the start, January, and the end is at the end of the year or the end of the time frame, which in this case ends with our last transaction. So we're a little out of date on some transactions, but that's okay. All right, so I think that's the bulk of what we need to do from an overview perspective. Let's start digging into some of these key areas. So here under settings, the first thing I want to show is the general settings. This is where you go really at the beginning, set a few things, and move forward. So your customer number will be in there if you ever need to reference that when calling support. You got your name and address and phone number. Those will show up on the checks that you're printing, and then check style using top or middle, and then 2 signatures. We'll look at that when we get into the check queue. Next up is books, which like I mentioned before, you can have multiple books. You can change that up here in the top left. And so if you want to manage things separately, if you have different charts of accounts, you can do that. Now, the way to tell what's unique about the books and what is consistent across all books is by looking at the settings. So here, under General Settings, Users, Roles, all of that is tied in with the account. And then the books will have separate charts of accounts, budgets, even separate fiscal years, separate transactions, of course, per book. So when we get into user permissions, you can set which books users have, but you wouldn't have to set up a new user for the same person under each book. So that keeps it consistent. All right, let's go into accounts next. So we're on our general book, and we'll go to chart of accounts. And this is the first thing that we should be looking at in the new year. So our accounts are set up into the 4 types of accounts: assets, liabilities, income, and expense. You can only view one type of account at a time, so all you have to do is click on it and the other will collapse. Now on this view there are 2 types of line items. I don't want to say accounts because they're not truly accounts. You can have a category, which is kind of like a folder, or an account itself. Now an account can process transactions. You can tie transactions to an account, whereas a category is just a summary of all the accounts underneath it. And so, for example, here under assets, we put central trust as a category and checking as a category, and then central trust checking as an account. Now you can tell this by a couple ways. First off, the bar on the left-hand side, if it's filled in, that says it's a category. And if you click on it, you really only can change the name. And so as we go down here, you can see that. Then you get into central trust checking. And that's when you can start entering an account number. You can choose whether to or not to write checks from this account. And then this is the beginning balance. So let's go in here and create, let's say we're going to create a new kind of petty cash account. Real basic. So we click New, and we'll call this School Petty Cash. And then we can put in an account number. Now account numbers are optional. And we included this because in Church360 Ledger, we're trying to keep it as straightforward as possible. There are certainly internal account IDs, but that's not necessary as you're managing the transactions. We allow you to put in whatever account number you'd like, so you could use it in multiple ways. If you wanted to use it for the accounts with the banks, you could put it in that way. If you are converting from a different system and you already have your account numbers put in that way, you can do it in that way. And in this example, we're using the structure that was set up in Shepherd Staff, our PC-based church management software. And it looks like Dale had a question about that. One of our attendees said he's changing from Shepherd Staff to Church360. What do I need to know to save my Shepherd Staff information? And so I'll kind of point that out as we go here. You really don't need to do too much to save it. You'll just upload your database. And we'll talk about that as we get to the end. I'll go into a little bit more detail during our Q&A time, but I'll try to point those things out as we go. Then you also have the ability to enter the initial balance. Now, the initial balance should be set as you are, if there's an account that carries balance, that should be set at the very beginning when you're setting up your chart of accounts. Otherwise, everything else would be a journal entry to move things around or to add balance to it. So it's important as you're setting it up to make sure you get all of your accounts that have a balance in there. So we'll go ahead and put that as 0 and submit that, and we'll just move that under the cash area. So now, because I don't have anything in here, I can go ahead and delete that if I wanted to. Real simple. I'm going to go back and add it in here, school petty cash. You know, if you're making any changes, put 0 in there right now. It's really easy to do that before you save it. So we'll go ahead and save changes, and that'll let me know that there's one new account, so I'll confirm that. Now, if I'm going elsewhere and going to like the farmer savings account, if I want to delete that, it won't let me because it has a balance. Now, if I go into something like an income account and say we're no longer renting space, and I click that, I can't delete it because there's been transactions, but I can deactivate it. And so it hides it and says this is an inactive account. And so that allows me to not use that or enter transactions into that moving forward. And so as you move into the new year, that's something to consider if you are deactivating, or if you wanted to clear up your chart of accounts but you had transactions before, you can deactivate these accounts so that they are no longer included in everything else. Your transaction history and everything else for previous years will still be there, so you can reference it. It just won't be active for new transactions. So that's a good New Year kind of thing. So let me do a quick overview of these types of accounts. I didn't start with that. I should have. Assets are accounts that carry actual dollars. So bank accounts, checking accounts, CDs, all of that. Liabilities are accounts that you owe money to, that you have the liability to pay out with actual dollars. And so things like payroll tax deductions, you might have dollars in there that are due to be paid to the appropriate payees, such as the government. So that is one way to use those. Other things that you might attribute in your personal life, maybe not as much with the church, would be things like credit cards or mortgages, although I know many churches have each of those. Income is money that is coming in, and so it is things that you would budget, such as offerings or payments for different kinds of events. Money that's coming in needs to be tracked that way, and then expenses, of course, is money that will be going out, and you track those as well. And so Ledger is set up to do all of the tracking for you with the proper credits and debits, which we'll look at as we get into transactions. And so you have to have things on both sides of the equation so that it balances. All right, so that is your chart of accounts. Let's move from here over into budgets. So budgets is the second thing at the top. Actually, I did rearrange some stuff, or I did deactivate it. I'll confirm that. Actually, before I go too far, let me go to fiscal years real quick. I'll close that. All right, fiscal years. This will automatically add a new fiscal year in the same starting month as when you began. So if you wanted to change the starting month, you could do that, and it'll create a short fiscal year for the interim in between. You can't have a long fiscal year. You're not going to have an 18-month fiscal year, but you could do a short fiscal year if you're changing your start date. And you'll see here that these previous years are locked. 2016 is still unlocked, but I can lock that. Oops, actually, sorry, the button indicates the action that you're going to take. And so this is unlock. These are locked right now. So just to clarify that. So we're in the 2017 fiscal year, which means we've already closed off 2016. So as we move into 2018, you can't close 2017 until it's over. But then you could go in here and you would see that there's a red lock button. So that's fiscal years for you. But before we go into that, or before we worry too much about that, we want to set budgets. That's something you can do ahead of time. So there you go. 2018 is a fiscal year that's upcoming. So we'll click that, January 28th through December 28th, or January 2018, pardon me, through December 2018. All right, we have here our budgets, which are income and expense, and it divides it up into those accounts and those categories. So you can see here these dark lines are the categories. So income is everything. The offerings is a category, funds is a category, but then these individual funds are actual accounts, and you can click in here and set those budgets. Now we've divided the screen, and we had a lot of discussion on the best way to do that. You can see all 12 months go across it, and I'm zoomed in here. If I was not zoomed in, you'll see we kind of break the lines to just go the full width of the screen so you can see everything at once. And even as you zoom in, it keeps it that up until a point where the letters are too big to fit in the cells if we kept it all across the screen. So this is your entire calendar, and if you had a non-fiscal year, you'd start off with, for example, July and go all the way to June. Now your totals is on the left-hand side, and that's so that you can quickly tie it with the account. So if you said, all right, in the general fund, we were going to have, that's 253,000. Let's say we wanted 240,000. Now that would divide it evenly, 20,000 a month across the whole year. So you can enter one total, and it just divides it by 12 and puts it out. That makes it really easy for many accounts that are just kind of consistent, or that you're not going to budget month by month. Now, for example, if you wanted to set it to be the same as last year and then change it, you could click these links down here, previous year budget or previous year actual. Maybe you set it to be the previous year's budget because you know that you put the work in to divide it by month, and so you set it for that, and then you go make those changes and say, okay, I know that this year we're going to do a big push in May, so I'm going to put that as 500 and kind of separate it out. So entry in this total field will divide it up, but you can still go and override it from then. You don't have to pick and choose which way you're doing it. Now, as soon as you hit one of these links underneath it, like previous year actuals, it'll override whatever you've got in the system. And you can do that for all accounts right up here at the top left and say, put everything as last year's actuals. Now, you'll see here that I don't have transactions from May to September. I haven't kept this database as up to date as I probably should have, but that's okay. So that's one way of doing it. The other way that I would suggest doing accounts, and this can be a little tricky, but for the people who like to do it this way, it's been fantastic. So you could export everything out to Excel. So we'll go ahead and do that, and let me open that file here. Make sure it shows up on the screen for you. Now it's going to go on this screen. I have multiple monitors, so it popped up over there. So it gives you everything in here. Now what you could do is if you wanted to send this out to people and say, highlight certain fields and say, okay, please fill out these numbers here, and all of these are just straight up numbers in the months, and then this just sums it. Maybe you put in 500 there, 500 there, and then say, I want to paste this in. You can go in here and paste that, and it'll paste it across from there. Now you can also do that, let's see, when you go in here, you can just select as many as you want. Oops, go there, and it'll fill it in for you. You see, it overrode what I had. So there's a number of different ways that you can do this. We've got it set up so that it'll look at what cells you've selected. Oops, and you can copy that, and you just click in the cell, even though you can't enter there. When you click paste, if you keep everything as is, let me make some changes actually, so that's a little bit easier to see. So we'll put 30,000 there. Do 500 under, or 5,000 under men's ministry, just to give it a little bit of something to adjust. There you go. See, 30,000 under general fund in January and 5,000 under men's ministry in January. It's a very quick way of doing it. The cells have to align, so don't delete any columns or rows. But if you're like me and you like to use Excel for a lot of things, that makes it really easy to just do it in Excel, paste it into Ledger, and you're ready to go. All right, so that's budgets. And down here at the bottom, you have your Save Changes, which actually gets hovered over by our information button. We probably should adjust that. You can reset and put everything back to what it was, or you can save your changes and it'll let you know. Now, that's a good time to talk about this I button here. This is the Information Center. This gives you direct access to our Help Center, and it'll give you some suggested articles. You can click, like here, how do I add a budget, and it'll go through those details. And then you could click See Original Article to take you to our complete help system, which puts it all in there. And there's a lot of great articles. If you have questions that yeah, there you go. See, if you have questions that aren't answered in the help articles, you could put that there and join the conversation. So lots of great ways for you to get the answers that you need. You can also go and send our support team a message, and it goes directly into the queue, and they'll get back to you very quickly, within 24 hours at the longest. That's only during our busy times. Usually it's within a matter of hours or minutes. So there you go. You also have a link to our phone number there too. All right, let's move on. The next thing that we're going to do is talk about transactions and imported transactions. So imported transactions can come from a few different sources. First off, you can go here to Imported Transactions and import a Paychex file. Paychex is a payroll provider. They are our provider of choice. They work with many of our churches. They have a connection to Concordia Plan Services, which is the official healthcare provider of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. And so they've partnered with Paychex to provide payroll services because it's so much more than just healthcare. So that's who we work with, and we have a unique file format. If you are using Paychex, we can walk you through that process. But what it does is it allows you to go and review your payroll and have everything set up by the individuals who are receiving it. So we have an example here. So it'll take the transaction from Paychex, put it in the lines that it needs for the general ledger, and allow you to go in here and submit that. Now, we've had other training on that, so I'm not going to go into any more detail than that today, but I just wanted to make you aware of that. So New Year is always a good time to determine if you want a new payroll provider if you're not using Paychex. So my congregation is actually moving to Paychex this January. All right, the other thing is here, you see there's a little icon, a green icon there. That's for Church360 members. So you can make deposits based off of what the offerings that are entered in Church360 members. So this was a sample batch, but you can say I'm going to deposit it into my asset account from this income account. There's tags there which are the funds from 360 members. So we'll look at that in a little while as we get into actual transactions. But I wanted to show you specifically that you could import these, and then we're going to get into recurring transactions in a little bit later. Those are the other pending transactions. So these are the imported ones from members or paychecks. We'll get into recurring in just a little while. So let me jump down here to users. Roles first and then users. So in Church360 Ledger, you can set up different user roles. So like this first example is an administrator role, where you can say what people can do. So administrator as the default out of the box can do everything. But then you could set up like here, mission trip leader, which says this role applies to the general book. It allows you to view just 4 selected accounts. So you can see mission trip restricted fund, mission fund, an income account, and then under expenses, I'm assuming, there we go, mission trips underneath there. So that allows you to provide the mission trip leader access to their accounts, but they can't create any kind of transactions, they can't edit it, they can't print things, they can just view it. So that way you're preventing them from always having to contact the church office and say, where's my budget at right now? You know, do I have enough expense for this? Or if you trusted them and want to allow them to enter transactions, you could do that too. I think in most cases it's just read-only that's necessary. So you can create as many roles as you would like, and so that you can keep it apart from a person, rather than saying, here is the John Doe role, and I'm going to assign that to John. You could say, here is the, like in this example, mission trip leader role, and then you go into users and say, I'm going to go ahead and add John Doe to it, john.doe at cph.org, and I'm going to say the role that you can have is mission trip leader. Now you can also add multiple roles. So if you have, like in my case, I'm on both the Board of Elders and on Church Council. If you wanted to put, if elders had access to just the elder accounts and Church Council had read-only access to the entire chart of accounts, I would get whatever is the most, or the most of the collection of those. So that's how roles are, and the new year is a great time to review that. If you have change in staffing or change of volunteers, sometimes it's easy to forget who has access to what. And reviewing your roles and your users at the beginning of the year is a great way to kind of start fresh and make sure that everybody who needs access to Ledger has that access. All right, let's go into transactions next. We talked about that a little bit. We're going to get into recurring transactions, which is a great New Year thing. So let's start off at the beginning with transfers. Like I mentioned before, these are paths to the transactions. They're transaction types. Everything just creates a journal entry. So if you're familiar with journal entries, you can already understand that that's just what your chart of accounts is all of your transactions are just different types of journal entries. So what you would do with a transfer is you would select one type of account. So central trust checking, unrestricted, and actually I should show you about that restricted. I forgot about that. But if you wanted to transfer from checking and put into that school cash, school petty cash, you would just select 2 assets, and by crediting the one and debiting the other, you are moving money from the unrestricted into the school petty cash. So you're taking money out. All right, let me show you something real quick. Let me go back here to accounts. I skipped over that before. I apologize. Under chart of accounts, under assets, you can take this account, so here, the central trust checking, and add restricted funds to that. These are funds that can only be used for that specific purpose. So you can say unrestricted, central trust checking, that's all the available dollars, but then these under mission trip and VBS are specifically assigned to those funds. So all you would have to do, and let me give you, here's central trust savings, which doesn't have that. Once I add a new restricted fund, I'll just call that mission trip restricted savings. can submit that. It'll automatically create an unrestricted fund for me. And that's where all of the existing dollars go when you do that for the first time. And then from there, I can transfer in between there. It's good to transfer that because I'm not actually making a bank transaction, but I'm tracking on the chart of accounts that money is being changed from the unrestricted to the restricted. All right, so let's go back to transfer. So I hope that makes sense. I'll give you a quick example one more time, and we'll do unrestricted central trust checking and move $500 from that into mission trip restricted savings. And see, you can see the credits and debits automatically get applied. So we'll save that, and we've created that transaction. Now, you may also be making a deposit. So you may say, I'm going to deposit into the unrestricted checking $5,000. And now that's saying, okay, where did that money come from? What income accounts did it come from? Well, $4,000 came from the general fund, which means that I'm $1,000 before getting balanced. So then, let's say $500 came from the mission trip. I still need to assign the other $500. I'll put that on the youth fund. That's what it came in from. And so down below, you can see that the that transaction has all of the appropriate credits and debits in that what we call a T chart. All right, so I'll go ahead and save that. The next transaction type is a payment, and this is very similar to the fourth type, which is a check. The difference is that the payment doesn't get printed. A check can be printed. So that's really the only difference. So let's say you have the electric bill, and you say that's coming out of the checking account, $250, and we'll put that as electric, which is an expense. So we're going to credit the asset and debit the expense, and it all aligns. So that's great, but what if this was just a reoccurring transaction, like the electric bill is? This is where you go and say make reoccurring, and we'll call this the electric bill, and that's every single month on the second day. So every month on the second day, the electric bill needs to be processed. And what that will do is up here under settings, under recurring transaction, it'll create this entry and say electric bill, the second of every month. Now that's, you see the other one is the payroll check. That's where these pending transactions come in. And in fact, I forgot the payroll check was not from paychecks before, it was from this recurring transactions. So that'll come up and then say, all right, you need to do this transaction, and when you click on it, it gives you almost like a template, this transaction, and you can change any details you want, which for things like the amount may change every month, but this gives you that reminder that says, okay, you need to do this here. We'll set up all the accounts and make it the same each time. Just update the transaction, change the date if you need to backdate it, and confirm. So that's what a recurring transaction is, and what's great about going into the new year is it gives you that chance to reflect and review all your transactions and say, okay, I entered in the same transaction 6 times in the last 6 months. I'll make it a recurring transaction, it'll remind me, and I don't have to re-enter it every time. That's what I would recommend for recurring transactions. Now, we showed there a moment ago with that payment that you selected a payee. You can manage your payees under settings and payees, and they're the same payees across all your books because usually it's the same information. So for example, my company, Concordia Publishing House, which many churches purchase from, is set up here, and I could put in here 800-325-3040 is the phone number, and our account number is 1234567 I can save those things there and just keep it updated. But I can also go into the history and see all of the different transactions. And I can print this out as necessary for things like year-end statements and put it all available there. So that's payees. It's especially important to have all that contact information filled out for checks. So if I was going to pay for my VBS starter kit, and the payee is Concordia Publishing House, I just start typing that. I don't have to put a check number in, so I won't right now. It'll show what assets are available to write checks, and only those. So unrestricted from Central Trust checking, we'll do $150. And do we have a VBS account? Didn't set that up, it looks like. So I can go and see all my different expenses and determine where we go. Here's ministry expenses and $150. And there we go. So that is my check. So that type is very similar to a payment, except I preview the check here, and when I click Save, then it says the check was added to your print queue. So I can go to the print queue, and this shows all of my available checks, and I can go in here and select the check to print it. There you go, and it allows me to enter that number when I click Print. So if I have pre-printed checks and I'm going to print this out, I look at what check I have and say, okay, this is number 789, and I'll type that in there and confirm. Now when it goes to print it, it's all properly lined for my checks, and you can purchase checks through our partner, Forms Plus Inc. They're a great organization and have special savings for new customers, so we highly recommend them. But you can see there that now all of that information is entered and ready to print out, including the check number. But this top portion, we're doing the top checks right now, allows for the pre-printed company name, church name and everything, and of course check number. And then it'll give you the appropriate amount of space depending on if you selected single or double signatures. Alright, once we're done there, then I just mark that as printed and remove it from the queue. So the queue allows you to batch up multiple checks. Maybe you only print checks once a week. You can enter those transactions throughout the week and then print them as they go. And if you have multiple checks, it'll allow you to enter in multiple check numbers. Moving on, I do want to show one of the cool things that you can do. So we talked about the transfer before, $500 to the mission trip. I'm on our home screen. I went too quickly. Let me go back. I click the ledger icon to go back to the home screen. It shows all of my transactions for all accounts because I'm right at the top of that tree. There's my transfer. When I click on that line, it will take me here to my edit transaction. And so you can see all of the details there. I could copy this transaction or void it if I wanted to. What I can also do is I should be able to edit that. Here we go. I can change this to, I thought there was an edit button. I just have to change it. So let's say I wanted to change it. Actually, it was supposed to be $400. I made a mistake. I'll go ahead and do that. I'll click Save. And now that has been changed. So when I look here, my transaction now says $400. Now, to the accountants who are watching, I'm sure that feels very uncomfortable for you to go and just edit a transaction. That's not proper accounting to be able to just go back and change it. That's how fraud happens. Well, we obviously know that and have taken that into consideration. For the average user, editing the amount makes the most sense. Oh, there was a typo. I meant to do 400. Instead, I typed 5. Let me go change that. So the end result is the same, that it's $400. But you'll see here that hovering over that little arrow tells me this transaction has been edited. And when I click on that arrow, it shows me that edited transaction. What it actually did was it just created an internal journal entry that changed that amount and tied those two transactions together. So it actually was 2 transactions, but it looks like it's just one with the end result. And up here under Reports, under Event Log, you can see here I created a new transaction with this unique number, just a $100 journal entry, a revision of this transaction. There you go. So that goes back to that audit trail that I was talking about earlier that makes it very important to track every change that happens. All right, so 2 more things before we go. And I don't have any questions in the queue other than the first one about Shepherd staff. So if you have more questions, go ahead and enter them in at this time. Let me go back here to my home screen, and we're going to go to Assets. One of the things that you should be doing, not just at the year end, but every month, is reconciling your accounts. And so we'll go to Central Trust, and we'll go to the checking. And once we get to a root account, an actual bank account, we get this Reconcile button there. This is my Central Trust checking account. I get bank statements about this account, so I need to reconcile. So I'll click Reconcile, and it'll take me into this green mode where it shows all of my available transactions that I can reconcile. I'll get the bank statement that'll have a beginning and ending balance for that time frame, and so I can enter those in there. And let's just say it says 151-046-17, and the ending balance is 155-896-17, which shows a difference of $4,850. So as I go through and see my transactions on that specific account, I have these two checks, this check and this deposit that affected it. As I click those, it tells me, okay, you have now balanced. We're going to mark these transactions as reconciled, and then I click Save. And they have now been reconciled. They now have a lock icon on each one of those. So again, it's a month-end process, but certainly a year-end process if you haven't done it in the months before, and you'll want to do December before you close off the year. The last aspect of that year-end process will be printing your reports. We have a variety of reports here, the core financial statements that you need. There's your income and expense report, and we've got it set for the entire year. But this date selector also allows you to change the report dates. It's not just a filter for transactions. So it'll update all your headings, quarter 4 2017 budget, actual, percent of budget remaining. You have these arrows that allow you to collapse and contract, or expand and contract that. And each of these reports works very similarly, that you get to choose your date range. The reports show different things. So like here, chart of accounts shows the starting and ending balances, debits and credits, and the overall change and change percentage. Now, the general ledger account or report is a little bit different than the others. It shows all of your different line items, and it gives you these accounts. And where it can, it'll give you the check number and the payee, but it also gives you the types of transactions. So if you wanted a check register for your Central Trust checking account, unrestricted, there we go, you could see all of that right there. If you wanted to do all accounts, but group them by account, you click that little chain, and that'll group all of them by that account there. And you can group them by the account, by the payee. So if you want to see all of the transactions, and you can still even filter down and say, okay, just want Concordia Publishing House. There you go. There's all those transactions. And of course, like I showed before, the event log is there. There's also a balance sheet. So those are your core financial reports. So I think we touched on everything. Some of it I went through a little bit quickly. I apologize. There's a lot to cover in a short amount of time. But if you have questions, now would be the best time to put them in. I just went over the 50 minutes by 2 minutes, so I'm doing okay. So let me go back to my presentation. If you are using Church360 Ledger, like I know a couple of you are not, you can start your free 37-day trial today at 360ledger.com. And we do a 37-day trial so that you can have a full month and a week, so that if you want to do your reconciling of the month-end statements, you can do that there. So free 37-day trial, 360ledger.com. There is my contact information one more time, as well as our software consultants. That's our team that can help you get started. See if 360 Ledger is a good fit for you, so you can reach out to them there. While I leave that up on the screen, I'll take a look at the questions, and it looks like the one that we still have the answer about Shepherd staff. Let me go ahead and talk about that a little bit. We'll switch over to the screen, and while I'm up here, I'll put the price in as well. I'm trying to remember. I know we were in the works of getting a listing of everything. Doesn't look like we have it right now, of coming over from Shepherd staff. So Shepherd staff is, there we go, our church management software, and there's a lot of different things that you can do within Shepherd staff. But if you are wanting to go online, Church360 is a great alternative. And so as you are preparing for your transition, all you have to do is have your database file available and you can upload it. Now, going back to Ledger, I want to point out something that's unique about Ledger that will, as you transition from Shepherd staff, will cause things to act a little differently. So you see here when we talked about restricted funds before, in a Shepherd staff, that's a very different model. It's dedicated accounts. And so if you're using that model in Shepherd staff, those two don't equate. Those transactions can't be converted. And so at that point, you can only bring over your chart of accounts and your balances. And it'll allow you to assign those dedicated accounts to a restricted fund and convert them that way, but just the balances of it. Now, if you are not using that, you can import all of your data from Shepherd staff into it, and your transactions will come too. And so it's a really simple upload when you are starting the setup process, and you can do that in a free trial as well. And so what I will recommend to some people is, if you want to see how that works, go ahead and start a free trial right now. Upload your database from Shepherd staff and see how it translates over. And our team can help you if there's any questions, but it'll give you an idea of the experience. You don't have to be a paying customer to import your Shepherd staff database. You can do that during the trial period to see if it's a good fit for you. But transactions, chart of accounts, balances, payees, all of those things will come over. And there'll be a few things that you'll have to set up. I believe budgets comes over as well. But you may have to set up your recurring transactions because those are a little bit different in Shepherd staff. But for the most part, it'll be an easy transition for you. I should also mention that as you transition over to Church360 Ledger, there is a $199 startup fee, but that provides personalized training for your congregation, and not just one person. If you have different people doing different things, you can speak with our onboarding specialist, and he'll train you on different aspects, or train different people on the aspects of Ledger that they need to know. So it's a really great benefit. That is a requirement for our customers because it's the best way to get started with Church360 Ledger. And again, you're not in in your own personalized training. You're not in a large group. You can ask all of the relevant questions that are unique to your congregation that you can't get at a live webinar like this. So you can really get into those details. So I'm not seeing any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up now. Thank you very much for attending today. I hope that you have a good grasp on how Church360 Ledger can help your congregation, but especially as you move into the new year, the different things that you can do to get started and get your finances in good shape for a great year in 2018. So thank you again for attending. Have a great rest of the day. Bye.